everybody, it's meteorologist Joe Cioffi on this Wednesday, second time today, Wednesday, February 21st, 2018, coming up at 6 o'clock Eastern Time in the U.S., and good to see a few folks already on board. Magnet Fishing Adventure TV, the fish are biting in Maryland at 83 degrees. We had some incredible all-time highs that were set today. Newark hitting 80 degrees, which was an all-time high for February and the first time that it's hit 80 in the month of February. All-time highs in New York City Central Park getting to 75, which is just absolutely incredible. And meanwhile, over some coastal locations nearby on Long Island, there were many areas in central and eastern Long Island that didn't get out of the 50s today, as evidenced by Brandon, who he's 63 now, but it was a struggle all day. And good evening to everybody. A few of you more jump on board. It hit Kevin Francis. Newark got to 80. And I think Central Park got to, I said 75. I think maybe it was 77. But it was all-time record highs there. And just as quickly as we said all-time record highs, we're going to be seeing some big changes. But I want to point out that this morning, when they did the soundings this morning and they measured, all the way up the atmosphere, the pressure of 500 millibars, you had to go up to 5,880 meters in the atmosphere to get that. And that is the highest that was ever recorded for this time of year. And it goes to the strength of that ridge off the southeast coast of the United States that is really, as was described by a few people that I know that are that I respect and are very well respected in the meteorology and climatology world. This is an unprecedented event with regards to the strength of the ridge off the southeast coast, and it matches up, of course, with the unprecedented deep trough and the pressure readings we've been seeing, with the readings that we've been seeing on the Pacific North America Index at minus 600, which is, I notice a lot of people that follow that index have been saying that they've never seen it that low. So a lot of weird things going on in the atmosphere right now. I think it's all tied to this stratospheric warming event that we had, and that is really just wreaking havoc on everything. Now, I have a cold front that's coming through, and I want to show you on the GFS first, and there's some precip with that. In fact, I think it might be better if I switch over to the NAM model. There actually were possibly some thunderstorms that developed this afternoon over parts of southeastern Pennsylvania down into northwestern Virginia with this weather front. I mean, this is crazy for this time of year, but as I said, you got a crazy pattern. And when I'll bring up the regional radar at the moment. And you can see them here coming in through eastern Pennsylvania and moving eastward. I don't know how much of this is going to hold together, but there certainly could be a shower. But this is going to start a big change so that at this time tomorrow, many areas are going to be 40 degrees colder. 40 degrees colder, even 50 degrees colder. I mean, it's possible that Newark, instead of being at 80, will be down closer to 30. Just amazing that we're talking about this. And we're also talking about the possibility, as I'll bring up the Weather Service map, for snowfall. I mean, they are going for amounts of less than an inch through most of this areas, but it's the principle of the thing that you could be at 80 degrees, and we're talking some snow and sleet and freezing rain for tomorrow into tomorrow night. Nothing big, mind you, but it is going to be, coming on the heels of this incredibly warm weather that we have. Let's bring up the warnings and watches and everything else that we have up at the moment, and we'll put it up on the full U.S. map, and you're going to see it's kind of busy here. We have winter weather advisories up along northern Pennsylvania and southern New York State, along the Pennsylvania-New York State border into the western Catskills, and then that extends back west-southwestward into Illinois, almost all of Missouri, Kansas, Nebraska, on through Oklahoma and northern Texas. A lot of this is because of ice We have flood watches up from northeastern Texas across Arkansas, western Tennessee, into the western parts of the Ohio Valley. We also have some flash flood warnings up in the red already, so the rain has been substantial in areas that haven't seen much. And we actually even have I believe I think that's a tornado. The yellow is a tornado watch. It's been so long since I've been looking at the severe weather. I just got to remind myself here. But we do have some severe weather over parts of Louisiana. Although now I'm just seeing in the update that was a tornado watch that might have just been discontinued, and I think it has. So my map didn't quite update it. It must have just happened. Out to the west, we have a scattering of winter weather advisories as we've got this deep trough out in the west, so it's cold there too. And by the way, over the weekend, probably going to see some heavy snows in parts of the upper Midwest with the next storm system that is coming out. Now, I want to bring up the national radar so we can view how active the weather is at the moment. And you can see the area of heavy rain that is indicated right down into northeastern Texas, into most of Arkansas, northwestern Louisiana, and then it extends up through the Ohio Valley. So that covers the flood watches that are up, and the rainfalls will be substantial in some areas on the order of several inches. And on the northwest side of this, where we have some very cold air, we're getting ice occurring through parts of north central Texas on into Oklahoma and northeastward from there. So hence the winter weather advisories that are up for tonight and the first part of tomorrow. And of course, we're going to see here some of that moisture running in as this cold air arrives. Now, back to the GFS model. And let me just bring that up to the front here. Well, actually, we'll start with the NAM model. And I'm going to do this wide first. The ice extent on the NAM back through parts of Texas and Oklahoma is not really all that exceptional. But you can see on the northern fringe here of some of the moisture running eastward that there's a band that forms of sleet, freezing rain, and snow across northern Pennsylvania and southern New York. The NAM seems to be the coldest of all the models. It actually brings sleet down to the coast, and I was looking at some of the NAM temperature forecasts for the higher levels of the atmosphere, and it's not impossible that could happen, believe it or not. Here's the tighter view with respect to the Northeast, and this is for tomorrow afternoon at 4 o'clock. You've got this area of wet snow into northeastern Pennsylvania and the Hudson Valley, southern areas of the Hudson Valley in sleet, Connecticut south of 84 in sleet, as is Long Island with rain everywhere else, some sleet into northwestern New Jersey, some snow across Massachusetts, and on up into northernmost Connecticut and Rhode Island. We have a surface that would support this, even though the air is not, you have very warm conditions aloft, but there's this strong high that's moving eastward across the lakes into upstate New York. So that is actually funneling down low-level cold air into the east, into the northeast in particular. And you'll notice out also in the west the extent of snow that's expanding through Nebraska and parts of eastern South Dakota and southern Minnesota. So that runs up into the state of Minnesota and northern Wisconsin as low pressure, a little wave that develops on Friday. That lifts up to the northeast. This is going to bring more chances for freezing rain across northern Pennsylvania and southeastern New York. If that high holds on a bit longer, which is what the NAM is suggesting, then this makes more sense. The other models are warmer with this, but I'm going to trust the NAM. It did such a good job with the storm last week, and I don't really want to bet against it. And then we have a really much more impressive storm, the last one of the bunch here, coming out from the southern plains and running northeastward into the western lakes. It deepens pretty rapidly. So this is, I think, going to produce 1 foot snows over areas of parts of Iowa, Minnesota, and northwestern Wisconsin come Saturday into Sunday. So this, to me, looks pretty impressive. The GFS kind of goes along with the same idea, and you can see it here on the GFS model. In the east, It's going to be a substantial rain from that low. There's a trailing front, an occluded front, and a warm front that's pinched right along the coast. So there should be some decent rains here on Sunday. Then weather conditions might improve as early as late Sunday afternoon. And then we're going to dry out for the first part of next week. Now, what's going on longer term? Well, everything is on course with what we've been talking about, as we're going to see a big upheaval in the upper air pattern. Here is the upper air from this morning. I mentioned that 588 height on the upper air map on the 500 millibar, 18,000 foot jet stream map. Right over, these were record readings that we saw here in the upper atmosphere as well. Deep trough out in the west, big ridge up in the Gulf of Alaska. That has been, pretty much unchanged for a while now. But notice things start to change. The ridge in the Gulf of Alaska begins to break down. The ridge in the east begins to break down. And out in the Atlantic, you've got this big blocking high developing first between Greenland and northwest Europe, Scandinavia. Then that pushes westward. Notice you get upper air storms that form, one over the Azores, another one over southeastern Canada as we move through the middle part of next week. And there's your block with this locked up system. Look at how the system off the Atlantic coast. Let me just back it up. The system that the GFS drops down from eastern Canada, southeastern Canada into Newfoundland, and then drops it southeast of Newfoundland and just rotates it there. This is what a block does. Things can't move, and while part of it moves out with the block still in place in the long range, we get this other upper low into the east, and now we're into March 9th. So I still think that we are going to see an opportunity for something to happen. The other important change, and this is going to be reflecting that Pacific North America index in the long range, is that the west begins to see pressure rises across the west and particularly into northwest Canada. And this is going to cause, I think, the Pacific North America index to go positive as we move toward March 6th, 7th, 8th, and 9th in that time frame. Even though the overnight runs didn't quite get there, I think that the model trends suggest that this is going to be the case. Now, I want to just punch up the European model, because the European model was on the same page here and actually gets the blocking underway a bit faster. Whether it's right or not remains to be seen, but here's that ridge in the east from this morning right here, and you can see over time going into this weekend that ridge disappears. The blocking forms in the Atlantic. It seems to form a bit faster than what the GFS has, but nonetheless, the GFS eventually gets there. And then notice that the European, as early as late next week, actually starts bringing pressure rises into the Pacific Northwest. So there's a substantial difference here. Here's the GFS, which still has troughing in the west, and it doesn't really bring those pressure rises up until after day 10. The European, on the other hand, has it happening much faster. So this is an important development here and has to be watched, because this would imply that something of consequence could happen as early as late next week or next weekend, as far as snow is concerned. Again, doesn't mean it's right. With blocking this strong, and with the atmospheric indices that we look at stretched to such extremes, remember that we're going to see some volatile moves on these model runs. So we're going to have to just take it one run at a time. We know where we're going with this. It's how we get there. See if we can get the Canadian. The Canadian model actually has more of the Europeans' idea, and it merges the block from over Greenland, over northern Canada, with a high building across the Aleutians and coming up in the other direction. But you can see how far south and displaced the jet stream is. I want to look at the surface. I haven't really looked at the Canadian today, but let's bring the surface map up of the Canadian model. And then we're going to go look at Europe, because that it continues to be. I'm sorry, let me go Canadian, CMC. I want to see how the Canadian resolves all this. We have our system after the weekend. Not much happens next week until low pressure moves across the southern lakes. Now, I want to tell you that if we get these pressure rises to happen in northwest Canada, like the European suggests, and the Canadian to a lesser extent, the track of this low that you see in the Gulf of Maine is going to be much further to the south. And the GFS kind of tries to do that on this run as well. So if those pressure rises occur in the Canadian Northwest faster, look for these storm tracks to get further and further south. You're going to have higher pressures up through Canada that's going to be spreading out and building into the east and the Midwest from the north and building rather strongly. That is going to force tracks to be further south, and then opens the door for opportunities for late season snow threats. And speaking of snow threats, why don't we take a look at what's happening in Europe, because we are going to see a sweep of cold air here. As we've been telling you, you've got this cold air in Siberia that just basically spreads out all across Europe. That is, again, when you've got that blocking high, here's the upper air at this point for Europe. And you've got this big blocking high between Scotland and Greenland. The upper air winds across Scandinavia and across Western Europe are coming, the upper air winds are coming from the northeast, as well as the surface winds. You're bringing down bitter cold air here. You've got your vortices, or your vortexes, one in Siberia, the other one sitting over northern Italy. That is pulling that cold air all the way down into southern and southwestern Europe. And you can see it here on the anomalies. In 5 days, you've got that purple area. This is in degrees Celsius, by the way. You're talking temperatures anywhere in the purplish, the bright purple areas, from 12 to 25 degrees below average. I mean, that's incredible cold when you do from a Fahrenheit standpoint. You can almost double those amounts. So you're talking temperatures running 20 to 35 degrees below average here in the bright purple, and that cold air pretty well stays around right through. Now we're at March 1st. Some real extremes here. Then you start to moderate conditions over in Siberia as the block now shifts to the west, but it still remains cold across Western Europe and over England and Scandinavia. Looks like pretty much in those areas for the whole 2 weeks. So this is going to be something to see. Why don't we bring up the snow map? I'd just like to see, look at this. There's some substantial snows being indicated in the next 10 days across much of England. So why don't we bring up the surface map and see how we get there. The East Base block is very conducive to cold weather across Europe for sure. And now we're at Sunday. It doesn't look like too much weather is going on over Western Europe, but then you start to see that wave of snow that comes in off the North Sea and into England and Scotland. Actually, looks like that's kind of interesting. You get these two what look like very small low pressure systems that are rotating around, and that's around this upper low that's trapped down in southwestern Europe, and you can see all the snow that it generates throughout much of through France and parts of Spain and over into Italy and beyond. So this is going to be quite the cold wave. I want to look at those temperatures. We're going to get 2-meter temperatures here. We're at the end of February, beginning of March, so the daytime is going to try to warm up in some places, but I'm just running this backwards. Okay, so it's in the 40s here. This is midnight Sunday. We're below freezing in all the areas in blue. That's 6 a.m. Then it goes barely above freezing, only to go to... here is 6 a.m. on Monday. I'm sorry, that's 6 a.m. Monday. So you've got temperatures down in the teens across much of France, and in England it's in the 20s, teens and 20s. Go further east and you're talking, single digits to below zero in Fahrenheit. Still very cold here. We're at now 6 a.m. on Tuesday, February 27th. Very, very cold conditions here for the end of February and the beginning of March. For the block, with the block forming, going to see some impact on the weather in southeastern Canada, depending on how we get these ocean storms and how they behave themselves, and things are going to start moving from east to west with the blocking pattern. And there's one low. This is for Saturday. So, the usual places that get snow. I'm trying to find that to see if we can have, see something that affects the Canadian Maritimes, which we do see in 5 days. Looks like snow over all of Newfoundland, nothing crazy. And we do have, there's an ocean storm. Now, this is where the block is now at work because that storm turns westward. You saw it here. I'll loop it back again. But here's that storm system actually turning westward and southwestward from Newfoundland to Nova Scotia as opposed to the other way around. That is what the block is doing. It's forcing everything to move in reverse out in the Atlantic because of the trapped nature of those upper air lows and the jet stream. The mean jet stream is south of 50 degrees north. So north of 50 degrees north, you're seeing upper air winds that are blowing from east to west as opposed to winds that normally would be blowing, and up until now and through the whole winter have been pretty much going from west to east. So a lot going on in the atmosphere with everything that we've seen today. So from a weather standpoint, you're seeing some historical stuff going on, certainly over my neck of the woods. Yes, there was an 80-degree temperature difference, Reaver 501, from I-80 in New Jersey to Nebraska, where it was near zero, and the battle zone in between in the Mississippi Valley is where we're seeing all that heavy rain and ice. So there you have it. The extremes, that 80-degree spread is playing itself out in a big way. In parts in the middle part of the right in the Mississippi Valley tonight, with potential for flooding and potential for serious icing. Joshua Pan, rather than focus on the GFS's specific with regards to because the GFS you're going to see runs that are going to show big coastal storms, and some runs will back off, and some places will have it one area, some places will have it another. Therefore, the thing to focus on, the fact that we are going into a major league blocking pattern, and watching to see if that PNA, that Pacific North America Index, rights itself. David Schwartz, yes, the point where you're starting to see the PNA go toward that neutral line and the NAO, which goes off the wall negative and then starts trending higher, that's where we may see some storm development. And I would look for this blocking pattern to perhaps last longer than when we get into it. It might wind up lasting longer than you think. This is a pretty extreme event that we're seeing that's happening now, and I think we might see the blocking event that's going to develop last a little bit longer. Stephen Franco, good evening to you. Good to see you here. 70s in Burlington, and then rain, and yeah. And here comes cold air for tomorrow and Friday up your way. Shelly Man Studios, good to see you here. Freezing rain in northeastern New Jersey. I think you might see some sleet tomorrow, Daniello. I'm going to go with the NAM with the colder atmosphere. I'm going to take a shot with that. Franklin Taylor, same air mass changes there in northern Arkansas from 70 plus yesterday to 32, 33 today. We're going to be having that shortly. Let's see. I'm just trying to get all of you. A banana high on the NAM. That's what it looks like. I agree with you, Reaver. And Robert Hurley just jumped on board. Hello to you. And you want the block, Reaver, out of the way by opening day in baseball. We'll see what we can do. Blocks, when they form in the springtime, sometimes they tend to hang around for a while. So don't be too shocked if it winds up staying around longer than what might be initially what will initially be modeled. The blocking pattern will eventually put us into colder temperatures, but let's be careful on how we define cold, Robert Hurley. this is not, I don't think it's going to be the kind you're certainly not going to see the kind of cold we saw back in December and January. The calendar begins to work against that with going into late February and March. But however, there will be cold Canadian air, and I think it will mean for below average temperatures once we start the month of, maybe as early as the latter part of next week, and then going into the first couple of weeks of March. But that still might mean for some areas to see temperatures getting into the 40s in the afternoon. That's not impossible. The upper atmosphere is going to be cold, and I would tend to think that the surface atmosphere for the time of year is also going to be relatively cold. And I did not cook some barbecue today, at least not yet, Shelly, man. But I am going to my mother's for lamb chops in just a little bit. You don't like cold air for springtime fishing, William Huber. Neither do I. I tried on Saturday, actually, a few casts down on the South Shore at one of the local brackish areas. I won't reveal where. And it was it was fine, and the sun was out, but there was a bit of a northwest breeze, and it was cold on Sunday to some degree, so it was a little bit difficult to stay out for too long, but I did my best. And it was my first time out for the year, which was a good thing. I'm just trying to think if there was anything else I wanted to say. Oh, brackish means that it's the point where the rivers, the freshwater rivers on the South Shore, meet with the tidal, the tidal basins. So you get the water is not quite salt water, but at the same time not quite fresh water either. They mix in there. And sometimes you get the saltwater fish to come up, like the snappers sometimes come up, and you'll see them congregate up in those brackish areas until they get big enough to go down out into deeper water and out into the bay and into the ocean. And at the same time, some of the trout spill over from the spillway and get in there. So you'll find brook trout in there, and you'll find snappers and panfish and a whole bunch of other things. The teleconnections, okay, real fast. Let's bring those up, as I did not bring them up before. But today's teleconnection indices. Remember, these change day to day as models adjust. So there's your PNA. Now here's today. We're at over that minus 600 reading. So it's no shock that we're as warm as we are here in the east with this extreme reading in the Pacific North America index on the negative side. Deep trough out in the west, big ridge in the east. But notice there's a steady climb toward the neutral line over the next 2 weeks. The NAO crashes to off-the-wall negative as we go into March 1st and 2nd, and then starts to climb. It's still, I consider minus 200 to be strongly negative, because that's usually the range that it's in. So it's not that far off of minus 200 at the end of the period. So you still have a pretty strong negative NAO here and trending higher. And the EPO is, negative, goes a little positive over the weekend, then goes negative, and then kind of trends toward the neutral line. So where you see these trends up toward the neutral line, there I think is your signal. So thinking March 6th to 8th. Now remember, that's the GFS. And those are the GFS ensembles. The European ensemble, the operational anyway, wants to bring that PNA up a lot faster. It would have the PNA up by March 2nd or 3rd. So we're talking next weekend. And that's when the European actually does try to do something off the mid-Atlantic coast. No way to know yet which model is going to have the upper hand in this. You want to kind of lean toward the European, but the European has not had a good winter. So, and the death of the trough in the West has been grossly exaggerated a few times. So let's see all these things get underway before we come into any kind of judgment about where this is all ultimately going to go. All right, folks, going to call it a night here. Website posts on meteorologistjoecioffi.com, so do check those out, along with nycweathernow.com, which my buddy Angry Ben Scott takes care of, and also weatherlongisland.com for you Long Islanders, which I haven't updated in a couple of days, but I will get around to it today. And I'm trying to think of anything else that we could be talking about. Nothing much comes to mind at this point, so we will see you tomorrow. We'll see what the weather conditions are like tomorrow morning. I may sneak in a live stream if I got time, like I did this morning, and then we'll be back tomorrow night at 6 o'clock Eastern Time. Tonight at 9:15 on my Facebook page, meteorologist Joe Cioffi and meteorologist Joe Rayo on the Joe and Joe Show. So we can do this all over again tonight at 9:15 on my Facebook page, which you can link to from my YouTube channel. Go up to the banner at the top of the channel page. There's links to my Facebook, Twitter, my website, and so on. So you can get to there from here. All right. Have a great evening, folks. We'll see you tomorrow.